Anna always believed her mother acted out of love, until a shocking discovery reveals years of silent manipulation. As she pieces together memories and uncovers secrets, she realizes her life was carefully controlled to keep her close and dependent. Determined to break free, Anna severs ties and sets out for a fresh start. But the weight of the truth she uncovered still threatens to pull her back into the past.
Anna's hands shook as she stared at her mother, the words spilling out before she could stop herself. "You've been controlling my life for years, manipulating my relationships, ruining my chances at work. You've sabotaged everything that mattered to me." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to keep going. "I just found out you spoke to Brian behind my back. You convinced him I wasn't ready for a serious relationship, didn't you?" The accusation hung in the air, electric with years of unspoken resentment. Her mother's expression hardened, a thin smile pulling at her lips. "Brian," she scoffed, "he was a distraction. You should be thanking me for saving you from wasting time on someone who was clearly beneath you." Anna felt the familiar sting of her mother's dismissiveness, a deep-seated pain that had rooted itself inside her over the years. But this time, she didn't let it control her. "No, Mom. I'm done thanking you for ruining my life." She could feel her chest tighten with emotion as the weight of everything she'd kept inside finally burst free. "You had no right." Her mother's eyes narrowed, the condescending tone in her voice sharper than ever. "You're being dramatic, Anna. I did what any good mother would do. I protected you." Anna's heart pounded in her ears as she stepped back, distancing herself from the toxic hold of her mother's words. "Protected me," she echoed, her voice rising. "You mean you controlled me? You isolated me from people who cared about me. You made sure I couldn't be happy or successful without you there to guide me." The words seemed to slice through the air, and for a moment, there was only silence. Her mother's face twisted, the mask of calm shattering as she snapped, "You've always been too weak to make your own choices. I had to step in. If I hadn't, who knows where you'd be by now." Anna felt the impact of the statement like a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt, and for a moment, she wondered if her mother was right, if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't strong enough on her own. But then, she thought of all the times she had almost broken free, only to be pulled back by the strings her mother had tightened around her life. She wasn't weak, she was suffocated. "No," Anna said firmly, forcing herself to meet her mother's cold stare. "You're wrong. I'm not weak. I'm finally waking up." The intensity in her voice seemed to surprise even her. The reality of what she had just said settled in, and it brought with it a sense of both terror and relief. For so long, Anna had feared speaking up, worried that she might end up exactly as her mother predicted, alone and struggling. But now, standing in this kitchen that suddenly felt too small, too full of memories that blurred between real and manipulated, she realized she had already lost so much. There was nothing left to fear. Her mother's response was to shrug, turning away with the kind of dismissal that had once shut down every argument. "Do what you want, Anna. You'll come crawling back soon enough." The casual cruelty stung, but instead of igniting more anger, it cemented Anna's resolve. "I won't," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I can't keep living like this." With that, she walked away, the echo of her footsteps following her out the door and into a world where, for the first time in her life, she was finally in control. The weight of the confrontation lingered long after Anna had walked out. As she drove aimlessly through the city streets, memories began to flood back, each one a piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. She had spent years believing her mother's actions were out of love, even if they hurt. But now, as she pieced together moments from her past, she saw the pattern for what it truly was, a carefully woven web of manipulation. Anna's mind drifted back to when she was in college, just a few months shy of graduation. She had been offered an internship with a prestigious company in another city. It was her dream opportunity, and she had been ecstatic, eager to take the leap and start a new chapter of her life. Her mother, however, had planted the seed of doubt. "It's so far away," she had said, her tone laced with concern. "What if something happens to you? There's no one there to help. I can't imagine you living in a place where you don't know a single person." Anna had hesitated then, just as her mother had intended. The doubts grew until they outweighed her excitement, and in the end, she turned down the opportunity. "There will be other chances," her mother had reassured her, pulling her into a hug. "You made the right decision." But there hadn't been other chances, at least, not like that one. That opportunity had faded into the distance, a road not taken, and Anna hadn't questioned it at the time. She pulled into a quiet parking lot, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as another memory surfaced. Her first serious relationship had ended in a sudden and unexplained breakup. She had thought things were going well. They had been talking about moving in together. But one day, he became distant and eventually ended things with a vague excuse about needing to focus on his career. Years later, a mutual friend had let slip that her mother had visited him, unannounced, to discuss Anna's future. She hadn't asked for details then, afraid of what she might find out. Now, the truth was impossible to ignore. She could see clearly how each moment had been carefully orchestrated to keep her close, dependent. It was like her entire life had been curated to fit her mother's idea of safety and security. Every time Anna had been on the brink of stepping outside that mold, there had been a reason, an excuse, or a perfectly timed concern from her mother to pull her back. A deep sense of betrayal welled up within her as she thought about all the friendships that had faded away, too. She recalled a high school friend, Sarah, who had always been supportive and encouraging, even when Anna doubted herself. Sarah had suddenly stopped calling one summer, and when Anna asked why, her mother had mentioned something vague about Sarah's bad influence. At the time, it hadn't seemed strange. Her mother always seemed to know what was best. Anna leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes as the pieces continued to fall into place. Her mother's grip extended far beyond the typical parent-child relationship. It was an insidious control that had dictated nearly every major decision she had ever made. But how had she been so blind to it all for so long? As she sat in the quiet of her car, Anna made herself confront the question she had been too afraid to ask before. How much of her life had actually been her own? What had she given up in the name of being safe? And what did she really know about the woman who had shaped her entire world? The answers eluded her, swirling in a mix of frustration and grief. The betrayal wasn't just about what her mother had done, it was about what she had allowed to happen. But now that she saw the pattern, she knew she could not go back. It was time to start reclaiming the choices that had been taken from her. She took a deep breath and started the car. There was a lot more to unravel, and she knew it was going to hurt. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid to face the truth. The following days were a blur of emotion as Anna grappled with the fallout from the confrontation. Her mind buzzed with the memories she had revisited, each one sharpening her awareness of the control her mother had exercised over her life. Anna had to understand how it had all begun. What had driven her mother to go to such extremes to keep her in check? She needed answers, and that meant diving deeper into her mother's past. Sitting at her kitchen table, Anna pulled out an old photo album, the kind her mother had kept meticulously organized over the years. It was filled with images of family holidays, school events, and the various milestones of Anna's life. As she flipped through the pages, she noticed something strange. Her mother was almost always in the background, standing just a little too close, her expression a mix of pride and anxiety. It was as if she had never fully trusted Anna to handle things on her own, even in childhood. Anna reached the section dedicated to her mother's younger years. The photos were fewer here, but they told a different story. There were pictures of her mother as a teenager, with a rebellious look in her eye, standing with friends who seemed carefree and full of life. Anna barely recognized this version of her mother, but there was one image that stood out, her mother, arm in arm with a man Anna had never seen before. The caption read, "Me and Leo, senior prom." Her mother had never spoken about a man named Leo. In fact, she rarely talked about her life before Anna was born. Anna's father had left when she was too young to remember him, and her mother always brushed off questions about the past. But the name Leo stirred something in Anna, a suspicion that there was more to her mother's story than she had ever let on. Anna put the album aside and picked up the phone. She needed to speak with someone who might know more, her Aunt Marissa, who had always been a bit estranged from the family. Anna's mother had never seemed to get along with Marissa, often describing her as irresponsible or of bad influence. But Anna sensed that Marissa might have a different perspective. After a few rings, Marissa answered, her voice sounding both surprised and curious. "Anna? It's been a while. What's going on?" Anna hesitated for a moment, then took a breath. "I need to know more about Mom's past. Do you know who Leo was?" There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "Leo, now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time," Marissa finally replied. "He was your mom's first love. They were inseparable back in high school. But it ended badly. Your mom never really recovered from it." The revelation sent a shiver through Anna. "What happened?" Marissa sighed, her tone softer now. "He left her. She found out he was seeing someone else behind her back. It devastated her. She thought she had her whole future planned out with him, and when it all fell apart, she didn't know how to move on. I think that's when she became, well, the way she is now." The pieces began to fit together, albeit painfully. Her mother's obsession with controlling Anna's life wasn't just about Anna, it was about trying to prevent the same heartbreak and betrayal she had experienced. Her mother had projected her own fears and failures onto Anna, believing that by keeping her close and shielding her from disappointment, she was somehow making up for her own lost dreams. Anna's chest tightened with a mix of anger and pity. She understood now that her mother wasn't just a controlling parent, she was a deeply wounded woman, haunted by a past she couldn't let go of. But that didn't make it right. Her mother's pain didn't justify the damage she had done to Anna's life. "I'm sorry, Anna," Marissa said, interrupting her thoughts. "I always wanted to reach out to you more, but your mom, well, you know how she is." "I do," Anna replied quietly. "And I think it's time I stopped letting her control everything." The call ended, and Anna set the phone down. The root of the problem went deeper than she had ever imagined, but now that she had uncovered it, she felt a strange sense of relief. Her mother's behavior wasn't about her own inadequacies, it was about her mother's inability to heal. Anna wasn't the weak one in this story, she was the one who still had a chance to be free. Anna had reached a tipping point. The revelations about her mother's past clarified the extent of the control and manipulation she had endured, but they didn't lessen the impact. If anything, knowing the roots of her mother's behavior made it more painful. For so long, Anna had excused her mother's actions under the guise of love and protection. But now she saw the truth. Her mother's efforts to protect her were really about keeping her tethered, ensuring Anna wouldn't stray far enough to experience the same kind of heartbreak. It was time for a clean break. She sat on her bed, staring at her phone, preparing herself mentally to make the most difficult call of her life. It wasn't to her mother, not yet. She wasn't ready for that battle again. Instead, she called a few close friends and family members to tell them about her decision. One by one, she explained that she was cutting contact with her mother, at least for the time being. Their reactions were mixed. Her best friend, Lisa, was supportive, though she expressed some concern. "You've been through a lot, Anna," Lisa said gently. "Are you sure you're ready for this? I know it sounds like a fresh start, but it's going to be really hard." Anna's voice was steady as she replied, "I know, but I can't keep living under her control. I need to find out who I am without her constantly influencing my life. I have to do this." Other reactions weren't as understanding. Her cousin Greg, who had always been close to her mother, questioned her decision. "Isn't this a bit extreme?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "I mean, she's your mom. She's always been there for you. You're really going to just cut her off?" Anna felt a surge of frustration. "That's exactly the problem, Greg," she replied. "She's always been there for me, even when I didn't want or need her to be. It's suffocating. I need space to figure things out on my own." She wasn't surprised when a few relatives took her mother's side, framing Anna as ungrateful. It stung to hear the criticism, but it also made her more resolute. She knew these family members only saw what her mother presented to the world, a concerned, doting parent. They didn't see the invisible change she had wrapped around Anna's life. Finally, it was time for the hardest part, calling her mother. Anna took a deep breath, then another, trying to steel herself for what was sure to be a difficult conversation. When her mother answered, her voice was calm, almost as if nothing had happened. "Anna," she said, with that familiar tone that had always made Anna feel like a child again. "I was wondering when you would call. You're not still upset about the other day, are you?" Anna's grip tightened on the phone. "Mom, I've decided to take a step back," she began, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "I need some space to figure things out without you being involved." There was a pause, then her mother's voice turned sharp. "You're really doing this? After everything I've done for you? This is how you repay me?" The hurt and disbelief were palpable, but Anna had expected it. Her mother didn't take rejection lightly. "It's not about repayment," Anna said firmly. "I just need to live my own life. I'm not saying we can never talk again, but I need time. I can't keep letting you control everything I do." Her mother's voice was icy now. "You're making a mistake, Anna. You'll realize it soon enough. And when you do, don't expect me to be waiting with open arms." The words cut deep, but Anna held her ground. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said softly, "but this is something I have to do." The call ended abruptly, her mother hanging up first, leaving Anna with a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She had half expected her mother to try to coax her back, to manipulate her with guilt or promises of change, but instead, her mother's reaction had been cold and final, as if Anna had committed an unforgivable betrayal. It hurt, but it also confirmed that her decision was the right one. Anna set the phone down, feeling a weight lift from her chest, even as a different kind of heaviness settled in its place, a bittersweet mix of grief and relief. For the first time, she felt like she was in control, but it came at a cost. She had no idea what would come next, only that it was her choice now. And that was enough. Anna felt a strange combination of freedom and isolation after cutting contact with her mother. She had expected to feel lighter, but the weight of the choice lingered, especially with the mixed reactions from friends and family. As she tried to settle into her new reality, she kept thinking about the conversation she'd had with her Aunt Marissa, the one person who seemed to understand what she was going through. Anna decided to visit Marissa in person, hoping to gain more insight into her mother's past and perhaps even find some comfort in shared experiences. She drove out to the small town where Marissa lived, the familiar landmarks from childhood visits evoking a bittersweet nostalgia. When she arrived, Marissa greeted her with a warm hug, her eyes full of the kind of empathy Anna hadn't realized she needed. "I'm glad you came," Marissa said, ushering Anna inside. "I've been thinking a lot about you and what you're dealing with. It can't be easy." They sat in the cozy living room, a soft light filtering through the lace curtains, giving the place a warm, inviting feel. As they sipped their tea, Anna couldn't hold back her curiosity any longer. "You mentioned that Mom never really got over what happened with Leo," she began. "But, was there anything else? I mean, there must be more to why she is the way she is." Marissa sighed and set down her cup. "There's a lot you don't know about your mother's past, Anna. She was always determined to keep up appearances, to make everything look perfect from the outside." Marissa's gaze drifted toward a framed photograph on the wall, one of a younger version of Anna's mother, smiling at the camera. "She did the same thing with our family. I don't think anyone ever really saw what was going on beneath the surface." Anna leaned forward, her heart quickening. "What do you mean?" Marissa hesitated, as if unsure whether she should reveal what she knew. "Your mom was always the responsible one, the good daughter. Our parents expected a lot from her, and she tried so hard to meet those expectations. But when things didn't go according to plan, like with Leo, she felt like she had failed. And in our family, failure wasn't an option." A wave of realization washed over Anna. She had always known her mother to be someone who demanded perfection, but she had never considered how much of that pressure had been passed down from the previous generation. "So, she took that need for control and perfection and turned it on me," Anna said, the bitterness evident in her voice. Marissa nodded slowly. "It's not an excuse for how she treated you, but I think it explains why she felt the need to be so involved in every aspect of your life. It wasn't just about keeping you safe, it was about controlling the one thing she felt she could still get right." Anna's mind raced as she processed the implications. The realization that her mother had been living under a mask of her own, projecting strength while hiding her own deep insecurities, was both heartbreaking and infuriating. "She pushed away anyone who got too close," Anna said, her voice low. "That's why Sarah disappeared, isn't it? And why so many of my friendships just faded." Marissa's expression turned solemn. "Yes, your mother didn't want anyone else influencing you. She thought she was the only one who knew what was best for you. But by doing that, she isolated you, just like she isolated herself." Anna felt a lump forming in her throat as memories of lost friendships and missed opportunities came flooding back. "All this time, I thought I was the problem," she whispered. "That there was something wrong with me that made people drift away." "It was never about you," Marissa said gently. "Your mother made sure of that. She manipulated situations, spread little rumors or concerns, always in the name of protecting you." The truth stung, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. Anna finally understood that her struggles to connect with others had been shaped by her mother's manipulations, not her own inadequacies. The bonds she had lost weren't because she was unworthy, but because they had been deliberately broken. "Thank you for being honest with me," Anna said, her voice firmer now. "I needed to hear this." Marissa reached over and squeezed Anna's hand. "You deserve to know the truth, and you deserve a chance to build your own life, free from her shadow." As Anna drove back home, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had spent so many years trapped in her mother's narrative, believing that her value and happiness were dependent on her mother's approval. But now she was beginning to see that she could write her own story, one where she didn't need to be perfect or controlled, just authentic and free. After her visit with Marissa, Anna felt a renewed sense of clarity and determination. But as she tried to move forward, her mother seemed more determined than ever to tighten her grip. It began with frequent, unexpected visits to Anna's apartment, where her mother would show up unannounced, claiming she was just concerned and wanted to talk. Each time, Anna felt her hard-earned resolve faltering, her mother's presence pulling her back into the familiar cycle of guilt and obligation. The situation worsened when her mother began to appear at Anna's workplace. One afternoon, as Anna was leaving a meeting, she saw her mother waiting in the lobby. Her heart sank as she noticed the sympathetic glances from her coworkers. The mere sight of her mother standing there, looking out of place and entirely too familiar, triggered a mix of embarrassment and frustration. "Anna, we need to talk," her mother said as soon as Anna reached the lobby. Her voice carried the same authoritative tone that had always made Anna feel like she had no choice but to comply. "Mom, you can't just show up at my work like this," Anna replied, her voice low and tense. "This isn't the time or place." Her mother's eyes narrowed, the calm demeanor giving way to something colder. "If you won't answer my calls, what choice do I have? I'm worried about you. Everyone is. You're not yourself lately." Anna clenched her jaw. "I'm trying to be myself, for the first time in my life, and you're not helping. Please, just go home." The dismissal clearly wounded her mother, who recoiled as if struck. "Fine," she said, her voice brittle. "But don't think I'm going to give up on you." As her mother walked out of the building, Anna stood there, feeling the weight of the encounter settle heavily on her shoulders. She could see in her mother's actions the same old pattern. Whenever Anna pulled away, her mother found ways to reel her back in, exploiting her insecurities and fears. This time, however, Anna wasn't going to fall for it. She knew she needed help to keep her resolve. That evening, she started looking up therapists, recognizing that she needed professional guidance to navigate the emotional minefield her mother had created. It took a few phone calls, but she eventually found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and manipulation. Their first session left Anna feeling hopeful, though emotionally drained. "I think it's time you set some boundaries with your mother," the therapist had said. "Firm boundaries that she cannot cross." The words echoed in Anna's mind over the next few days as she prepared herself to take another step toward independence. She decided to write her mother a letter, outlining her need for space and clearly stating that further unannounced visits would not be tolerated. She kept the tone respectful but firm, and when she dropped the letter in the mailbox, she felt a sense of relief, as if she had taken a significant step forward in reclaiming her life. But her mother's response came swiftly, and with it, the situation escalated. One night, Anna came home to find her mother waiting outside her apartment building. This time, she didn't look angry, she looked desperate. "Anna, I read your letter," her mother began, her voice trembling. "You don't really mean it, do you? You can't just push me away like this. I'm your mother." Anna felt a pang of guilt but forced herself to remain calm. "I do mean it, Mom. I need space, and I need you to respect that." Her mother shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "This isn't you, Anna. Someone's putting ideas in your head. Is it Marissa? Has she been filling you with lies about me?" Anna's patience snapped. "No one is putting ideas in my head," she said, her voice rising. "I'm finally seeing things clearly for the first time. This is my decision, and I need you to accept it." For a moment, her mother's expression softened, as if she were about to concede. But then the mask fell back into place, and her eyes flashed with anger. "You think you can just walk away from me," she said, her voice low and bitter. "After everything I've done for you, you're going to turn your back on me? You'll regret this, Anna. One day, you'll realize how much you need me." Without another word, Anna turned and walked into the building, her heart pounding. She didn't look back as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, but the words echoed in her mind long after she had closed the door behind her. She knew this wasn't over. Her mother wasn't going to let go easily, and Anna would need to be stronger than ever to keep moving forward. But as she sat in her quiet apartment, she felt a determination that was unfamiliar but welcome, a strength that was entirely her own. The weeks that followed were marked by tense silence. Anna heard nothing from her mother, and though the quiet should have been a relief, it felt ominous, like the calm before a storm. She kept herself busy with work and therapy, determined to stay focused on her progress. But there was a persistent unease in the back of her mind, a sense that her mother was planning her next move. Then, one evening, the silence was broken. Anna had just returned home from a long day at work when her phone rang. She hesitated before answering, seeing her mother's name flash on the screen. Her therapist had suggested not engaging unless absolutely necessary, but something compelled Anna to take the call. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Anna, I've had enough." Her mother's voice came through, trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "I'm not going to let you throw your life away because of some delusion that I'm the enemy. We need to talk, face to face." Anna could feel the familiar pang of anxiety creeping in, but she took a deep breath and responded, "Mom, I've made myself clear. I need space. I can't keep having this same conversation." "I'm coming over," her mother declared, and before Anna could protest, the line went dead. Panic gripped her as she realized her mother would arrive any minute. She felt a surge of anger. How could her mother still refuse to respect her boundaries? A part of her wanted to lock the door and pretend she wasn't home, but she knew it wouldn't make a difference. Her mother was relentless, and hiding wouldn't solve anything. When her mother arrived, she pounded on the door, the sound reverberating through the small apartment. Anna opened it reluctantly, bracing herself for whatever was about to happen. Her mother pushed past her into the living room, her expression a mixture of frustration and something else, fear. "We can't keep going on like this, Anna," she began, her voice cracking slightly. "You're not seeing things clearly. You don't understand what's really happening." Anna crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "Then why don't you explain it to me?" she said, a challenge in her tone. "Explain why you can't just let me live my own life." Her mother took a deep breath, and for the first time, Anna saw a flicker of vulnerability cross her features. "I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did," she said quietly. "I couldn't protect myself back then, but I can protect you." "What mistakes, Mom?" Anna demanded. "This isn't about protecting me. It's about control. You've been trying to live my life for me because you can't let go of your past." The accusation hung in the air, and for a moment, Anna thought her mother might walk out. But instead, she sank into the nearest chair, her expression collapsing into one of raw emotion. "You've always been so fragile, Anna," she said, her voice trembling. "You've always needed me, even if you don't see it. I couldn't trust you to make the right decisions because you're not strong enough." Anna felt the words like a punch to the gut. All the years of doubts, of feeling inadequate, crystallized in that moment. "So that's what you think of me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "That I'm weak? That I can't handle my own life?" "It's not about what I think," her mother replied, her tone defensive now. "It's about what I know. I've seen you fall apart, Anna. I've had to pick up the pieces. I did it for your own good." The pain in her mother's voice almost made Anna hesitate. But then the anger surged back, burning away any sympathy. "You didn't do it for me," Anna shot back, her voice rising. "You did it for you. Because you were afraid of what would happen if I actually grew up and didn't need you anymore." The room fell silent, the weight of Anna's words settling between them. Her mother stared at her, a look of shock and hurt spreading across her face, as if Anna had just voiced an unforgivable truth. "I only ever wanted to protect you," her mother whispered, a final attempt to reclaim the moral high ground. "Protecting me doesn't mean controlling me," Anna replied, her voice steady now. "I'm not a child anymore. And I'm not weak. You just never gave me a chance to prove it." Her mother looked away, her face hardening again. "If you want to believe that, go ahead. But don't come crying to me when you realize you're wrong." Without waiting for a response, she stood up and walked out, the door slamming shut behind her. Anna sank onto the couch, her legs trembling. The confrontation had left her feeling drained, but beneath the exhaustion was a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. Her mother's admission had cut deep, but it also illuminated a truth Anna had always needed to face. She had never been weak, only made to believe she was. For the first time, she understood that breaking free from her mother's control didn't just mean physical distance. It meant shedding the doubts and insecurities that had been instilled in her since childhood. She wasn't fragile, she had survived a lifetime of manipulation and still found the strength to walk away. And that realization, more than anything, filled her with hope. The painful revelation from her mother had left Anna emotionally raw, but it also solidified her decision to make a clean break. It wasn't enough to set boundaries, she needed to put real distance between herself and the past. Moving to a different city, away from the constant shadow of her mother, was the only way she could truly start over. Anna spent the next few days searching for new opportunities in different cities, combing through job listings and rental ads. The process was daunting, but she felt a sense of relief with every step she took towards independence. Finally, she found an opening in a marketing firm in a city several hours away, a fresh start, far enough to give her the space she desperately needed. She scheduled an interview, booked a hotel, and packed a small suitcase. Her apartment, filled with years of accumulated belongings, felt suffocating as she began to sort through what to take and what to leave behind. There were boxes of mementos that her mother had saved for her, things from her childhood that she had always assumed were kept out of love. Now, as she rifled through them, they felt more like chains than cherished memories, each item a reminder of the life her mother had curated for her. Anna decided to leave most of it behind, choosing to pack only what was necessary and what truly held meaning for her. As she folded the last of her clothes into the suitcase, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a message from her cousin Greg, who had been one of the most vocal critics of her decision to cut ties with her mother. His message was brief but unmistakably judgmental. "Moving away? This is just going to hurt your mom even more, you know." You should reconsider. Anna felt a familiar pang of guilt, but it didn't deter her. Instead, it fueled her determination. She was done living for other people's expectations. Greg's words echoed the same mentality that had kept her trapped for so long, the belief that her happiness should always come second to her mother's. She typed a curt response, "This isn't about hurting anyone. It's about finally living for myself," then turned her phone off and tossed it into her bag. The following day, Anna drove out to visit Marissa one last time before the move. She had come to rely on her aunt's support, and it seemed right to tell her in person. Marissa greeted her warmly, a look of pride in her eyes as Anna explained her plan. "I'm proud of you," Marissa said, giving Anna's hand a squeeze. "You're doing something incredibly brave, even if it doesn't feel that way right now. Sometimes, leaving is the strongest thing a person can do." Anna nodded, grateful for the words. "I'm scared, though," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "What if it's not enough? What if I still feel stuck?" Marissa shook her head gently. "Healing isn't a straight path, Anna. It's going to be hard, but you'll find your way. Just remember that you're not alone. You have people who care about you." The reassurance brought a small, tentative smile to Anna's face. She had often felt isolated in her struggle, but her conversations with Marissa had helped her realize that support didn't always have to come from the places she had once thought. It could come from people who understood her, even if they weren't the ones she'd been closest to. The day before her scheduled interview, Anna called a moving company to handle the few pieces of furniture she planned to take. As she packed up the last of her things, the reality of the move began to sink in. This was it, the end of the only life she had ever known and the beginning of something completely different. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating. For the first time, she felt like she was stepping into a life that she had chosen for herself, not one that had been chosen for her. Before leaving the apartment, she took a final look around. The empty walls and bare floors made it seem like a different place altogether, not the home where she had lived for years. She took one last deep breath, closing her eyes to steady herself, then turned and walked out the door, locking it behind her. As she drove away, the city she had known all her life disappeared into the distance. She expected to feel sadness or regret, but all she felt was a growing sense of possibility. The future ahead was uncertain, but it was hers, and that was all she needed. The move went by in a blur. Within a few days, Anna found herself standing in her new apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a city where everything felt unfamiliar. The starkness of the empty rooms echoed around her, a reminder that she was truly starting from scratch. She unpacked her few belongings with a mix of nervous excitement and exhaustion, the reality of the change settling in. The first night felt strangely quiet. Anna lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as thoughts swirled in her mind. This wasn't like anything she had done before. There was no safety net. No familiar faces, just a phone call away. She was on her own, and the responsibility of her choices weighed heavily on her. But alongside that fear was a growing sense of pride. She had made it this far, she had taken the leap. The following day, Anna arrived at her new job for the first time, a knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. She was introduced to her coworkers and given a tour of the office. Everyone seemed welcoming, but Anna could feel the nervous energy coursing through her as she tried to remember names and faces. It was as if she were an actor on a stage, playing a role she wasn't entirely sure she was ready for. But as the hours passed, she found herself easing into the rhythm of the day. The work was engaging, and her new supervisor, Laura, was patient and encouraging, helping Anna settle into her role. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope that maybe she could succeed here, that maybe this fresh start would actually lead to the life she had always imagined for herself. Outside of work, Anna began exploring her new surroundings. The city, with its bustling streets and unfamiliar neighborhoods, was a constant reminder of the freedom she had fought to obtain. She found solace in small routines, stopping by a cafe for a morning coffee, jogging in the park after work, cooking dinner in her tiny kitchen while listening to music. Each new habit made her feel more at home, grounding her in this new reality. One evening, she decided to step outside her comfort zone and attend a social event hosted by a local community group. It was a small gathering, mostly people looking to meet new friends or network. As Anna mingled, she found herself talking with a woman named Claire, who seemed friendly and easy to talk to. "New to the city?" Claire asked, sipping her drink. Anna nodded. "Just moved here last week, actually. I'm still trying to find my way around." "Same here," Claire replied with a smile. "It takes a while to settle in, but it's an exciting place. There's always something happening." The conversation flowed easily, and by the end of the evening, Anna had exchanged numbers with Claire. It was a small victory, but it felt significant, a first step toward building a life that wasn't defined by her past. Despite the progress, the move wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when the loneliness crept in, especially on quiet nights when the emptiness of the apartment seemed to close in around her. The distance from her mother wasn't just physical, it was emotional, too. The thought of reaching out crossed her mind on more than one occasion, but she knew it was still too soon. The wounds were still fresh, and she needed time to heal before even considering that possibility. Anna continued her therapy sessions remotely, finding them to be a crucial anchor in this period of transition. Her therapist helped her work through the conflicting emotions that still surfaced, especially the lingering guilt. It's okay to feel conflicted, her therapist reminded her during one session. Just remember that you're doing this for yourself, and that's not selfish, it's necessary. As the weeks turned into a month, Anna began to notice small but meaningful changes. She felt more confident at work, more at ease in her new surroundings. She was starting to make friends, including Claire, who had become a regular companion for coffee or weekend outings. The pieces of her life were slowly coming together, and with each passing day, the person she was becoming felt a little more like the person she had always wanted to be. One evening, as she sat on her small balcony, the city's lights twinkling in the distance, Anna allowed herself a moment to reflect on how far she had come. The fear and uncertainty hadn't disappeared, but they no longer felt insurmountable. She had stepped into the unknown, and instead of falling, she had found her footing. For the first time, she felt a sense of peace about her decision. She wasn't defined by her past or by the expectations of others. She was living on her own terms, and that realization filled her with a quiet but profound joy. As Anna settled further into her new life, she found herself thinking less and less about the past. It was still there, of course, echoes of her old fears and doubts would occasionally surface, but they no longer held the same power over her. Each day, she was becoming more confident in her ability to navigate life on her own terms. The city that had once seemed so unfamiliar now felt like it belonged to her, with its hidden gems and everyday routines providing comfort and a sense of belonging. Then, one afternoon, Anna returned home to find a letter waiting for her. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the familiar handwriting on the envelope, her mother's. For a moment, she just stared at it, torn between curiosity and the instinct to toss it aside. Eventually, she sat down at the kitchen table and opened the letter, her hands trembling slightly. The letter began with a familiar tone of reproach, her mother's words laced with disappointment. "I don't understand why you felt the need to leave," it read. "After everything I did to protect you, this is how you repay me? But I want you to know that I'm willing to forgive you and put this behind us. We can go back to how things were." Anna's breath caught in her throat as she read. It was as if her mother hadn't understood anything at all. The entire letter was filled with the same manipulative tactics, guilt-tripping and minimizing Anna's need for independence. Her mother's attempt to mend their relationship was not an apology, but a demand for Anna to conform once more, to step back into the role she had always been forced to play. But then, towards the end, there was a line that made Anna pause. "I know I've made mistakes, and maybe I was too hard on you. I just wanted to protect you from getting hurt the way I did. I hope someday you'll understand." For a moment, Anna's resolve wavered. There was a hint of vulnerability in those words, a small crack in the armor her mother had always worn. It wasn't an admission of everything that had gone wrong, but it was something. It was a glimpse of the scared, wounded woman her mother had always been beneath the surface. Anna folded the letter and set it aside. She wasn't ready to respond, not yet. Maybe one day she would, but that day wasn't today. There was still too much healing left to do, and reaching out would only risk reopening wounds that had barely begun to scar over. Her focus needed to remain on herself, on continuing to build a life free from the control and guilt that had shaped her for so long. The following weeks brought more clarity. Her friendship with Claire deepened, and she began to open up more about her experiences. Claire's support was steady and unwavering, providing a safe space for Anna to share the struggles and triumphs of her journey. Anna also found herself getting more involved in the community, joining a local book club and signing up for a pottery class. Things she had never dared to try when her life was dominated by her mother's expectations. The more she embraced her newfound independence, the more she realized how much she had been holding herself back. It wasn't just her mother's influence that had kept her restrained, it was also her own fear of failing without that constant, albeit toxic, safety net. Now, with each new experience, she felt herself shedding the weight of those old fears. She was discovering new passions and strengths she didn't know she had, and for the first time, the future felt like a blank canvas, ready to be painted in colors of her own choosing. One evening, as Anna was preparing dinner, her phone buzzed with a message from Marissa. "I heard from your mom. She mentioned the letter. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you." Anna felt a wave of gratitude. She had come to rely on Marissa's quiet support during this process, and it was comforting to know that someone understood her struggle without judgment. It reminded her that, while she was standing on her own now, she wasn't truly alone. As she sat down to eat, she glanced at the letter on the corner of the counter. The emotion stirred up by her mother's words had subsided, leaving a sense of calm resolution. She wasn't angry anymore, she wasn't even sad. She just felt free. Her mother would always be a part of her life, a part of her story, but that didn't mean she had to define it. Anna took a deep breath and smiled. The future was still uncertain, full of unknowns and what-ifs, but that no longer frightened her. She had faced the hardest challenge of all, breaking free from the invisible chains that had bound her for so long. Now, she was ready to embrace whatever came next, confident that she had the strength to handle it. She walked to the balcony and looked out at the city lights, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. The journey ahead would still have its ups and downs, but she was finally steering her own course. For the first time in her life, Anna knew that no matter where she went, she would be walking forward on her own terms, and that was enough.